Millions of people message each other every second. Files travel across the planet in the blink of an eye. But did you know the Internet was originally built for military purposes only and kept in secret, and only decades later became something ordinary people like us could use? If not, today I'll tell you the real story of the Internet. Find a comfortable spot. You're with me on the Custom Stories in English. Let the Internet story begin. Before the Internet existed, people still needed to share information, just much, much slower. A letter from New York to London took weeks. A telegram was faster, but you paid per word, so people wrote in short, clipped sentences, almost like an early version of a text message. Telephones existed, but calling another country cost a small fortune. And computers? They did exist by the 1950s, but each one was an island. A machine at Harvard couldn't talk to a machine at MIT. There was no bridge between them. Scientists, military officers, researchers, they all had the same quiet frustration. We have powerful machines, but they can't share anything with each other. That frustration is exactly what started everything. Now, to understand why the Internet was invented, you need to understand one word: fear. It's the early 1960s. The United States and the Soviet Union are locked in the Cold War, not fighting directly, but circling each other like two fighters in a ring, each one waiting for the other to blink. Both sides have nuclear weapons, and everyone knows that one strike could destroy not just cities, but entire communication systems. Telephone lines, military networks, command centers, gone in minutes. Here's the problem that kept American generals up at night. If the Soviets launched a nuclear attack and destroyed the main communication hub, how would the U.S. military coordinate a response? How would anyone talk to anyone? The answer in the early 60s was they couldn't. The entire system had a fatal weakness, and someone needed to fix it. That someone worked at a small, quiet government agency with a very big mission. Before we meet that agency, we need to understand the technical problem they were trying to solve, because it's actually quite elegant. Imagine a spider web. Now imagine that web has one single center point, and everything connects through it. If you destroy that center, the entire web falls apart. Nothing can reach anything else. That's exactly how communication networks worked in the 1960s. Centralized, fragile, one point of failure. Cut the right cable, bomb the right building, and silence. Total communication blackout. The military needed something completely different. A network with no center. No single point that, if destroyed, would collapse everything. A web where if you cut one thread, the signal simply finds another path, automatically, without human intervention. It sounds simple, but in 1962, nobody had ever built anything like it. Nobody even knew if it was possible. That question landed on the desk of a small research agency in Washington and changed the world. The agency was called ARPA, the Advanced Research Projects Agency. Created in 1958, quietly, without much fanfare. No famous headquarters, no public announcements. Just a small team of very smart people with government funding and one directive: solve the problems that nobody else can. ARPA wasn't an army of engineers building things themselves. Their method was different, and actually quite clever. They found the best researchers in the country at universities and private labs and gave them money, time, and one simple instruction: figure it out. One of the people they found was a psychologist turned computer scientist named J.C.R. Licklider. In 1962, he wrote an internal memo describing something he called the Intergalactic Computer Network, a system where computers around the world could talk to each other and share information. His colleagues thought it sounded like science fiction. Licklider didn't care. He started funding the research anyway. He never built the Internet himself, but he planted the idea in exactly the right minds at exactly the right moment. Sometimes that's all it takes. So ARPA has the mission, the money, and the researchers. But they still need the key idea, the actual technical solution. And it comes from an unlikely place. A Rand Corporation analyst named Paul Barron. Barron's insight was this: the problem with existing networks isn't the wires, it's the logic, the way information travels. Here's how it worked before. Imagine calling a friend. The phone company creates one dedicated connection between you and them, a single unbroken line for the entire conversation. That line is occupied until you hang up. This is called circuit switching. It works fine for phone calls, but for military data, it's a disaster. One broken line and everything stops. Barron proposed something radical. What if, instead of sending information as one continuous stream, you broke it into small chunks, little packets of data? Each packet travels independently, finds its own route through the network, and reassembles at the destination. Think of it like this. You want to send a 10-page letter across a city during a storm. You could hand it to one courier and hope he makes it. Or you could tear it into 10 pieces, give each piece to a different courier, send them through different streets, and let them meet at the destination. Even if 2 couriers get lost, the other 8 arrive. The message gets through. That's packet switching. And it's still how your messages, videos, and emails travel today. The idea was brilliant. Now someone had to actually build it. By 1969, the theory was ready. Now came the real test. Could it actually work? ARPA selected 4 locations for the first nodes of the network: UCLA in Los Angeles, Stanford Research Institute just south of San Francisco, UC Santa Barbara, and the University of Utah in Salt Lake City. 4 computers, 4 universities, thousands of miles between them. The team was young, mostly graduate students and junior researchers. No corporate budget, no army of engineers, just brilliant, slightly sleep-deprived people in university basements, surrounded by hardware the size of refrigerators. On October 29, 1969, they were ready. The goal was simple: connect UCLA to Stanford and send one word: log in. Charlie Klein, a 21-year-old student at UCLA, sat down at the terminal. A researcher at Stanford picked up the phone, yes, an actual telephone, to confirm each letter as it arrived in real time. That's how primitive the setup was. 2 cutting-edge computers communicating through a phone call. Charlie typed, L. Got the L, said Stanford. O. Got the O. Then he typed G, and the system crashed. Completely. Stanford received exactly 2 letters. The first message ever sent over the Internet was L.O. Accidental, incomplete, and somehow perfect. Like the network itself was whispering, "Hello, world. I'm just getting started." An hour later, Klein rebooted the system, fixed the bug, and sent
log in successfully. The connection held. Two computers, 400 miles apart, had spoken to each other for the first time in history. Nobody celebrated in the streets. There were no headlines. Just a few exhausted students in a basement looking at a screen, quietly understanding that something had just changed forever. Word spread fast. Not to the public. ARPANET was still invisible to ordinary people, locked inside government labs and university basements. But among researchers, the message was clear. This thing works. And everyone wanted in. Within months, more nodes joined the network. By 1971, 15 computers were connected. By 1973, 35. Small numbers by today's standards. But each new connection was a proof of concept. The idea was real. The network was growing. Then something unexpected happened. Something that would define the Internet more than any military protocol ever could. In 1971, a programmer named Ray Tomlinson sat down and wrote a small piece of software, almost as an experiment. He wanted to see if he could send a message from one computer to another and leave it there, like a digital letter in a digital mailbox. He needed a symbol to separate the user's name from the machine's address. He looked at his keyboard and picked TAT, not for any poetic reason, just because it was sitting there, not being used by anything else. He sent the first email, then a few more to test it. Later, when asked what those first messages said, Tomlinson shrugged. "Something forgettable," he admitted. "I wish I'd said something more profound." He had just invented one of the most used communication tools in human history, and he couldn't remember what he wrote. By the late 1970s, email made up the majority of all traffic on ARPANET. The military had built a survival network. Researchers turned it into a post office. Nobody planned it that way, it just happened. But there was still a fundamental problem. ARPANET could connect computers within its own network. What about all the other networks that were starting to appear around the world? They couldn't talk to each other. Each one spoke a different language. That problem needed one elegant solution.
Think about what the world looked like by the early 1980s. ARPANET was growing, but so were dozens of other networks. Military networks, university networks, corporate networks, networks in Europe, networks in Asia. Each one built differently, each one speaking its own technical language. It was like a room full of brilliant people who all speak different languages. Everyone has something important to say. Nobody can understand anyone else. The solution came from two researchers, Vince Cerf and Bob Kahn. Their idea was simple in principle, revolutionary in practice. Create one universal language that every network in the world could speak. A common set of rules for how data gets packaged, addressed, and delivered, regardless of what kind of network it's traveling through. They called it TCP/IP, Transmission Control Protocol and Internet Protocol. Not the catchiest name, but what it represented was enormous. Think of it like international shipping standards. Before containers were standardized, loading cargo onto ships was chaotic. Every port did it differently. Every company had its own system. Then the world agreed on one standard container size. Suddenly, everything moved faster, cheaper, and more reliably. Ships, trains, trucks, all compatible. One standard global system. TCP/IP did the same thing for data. On January 1, 1983, ARPANET officially switched to TCP/IP.
Researchers called it Flag Day, the moment all connected computers had to speak the new language or get cut off. Some machines didn't make it, but the ones that did were now part of something larger than any single network. For the first time, there was one global internet, lowercase I, a network of networks. But it was still invisible to ordinary people. Scientists and researchers used it. Governments used it. Universities used it. The rest of the world had no idea it existed. That was about to change, because of one man working quietly in Geneva, who just wanted scientists to share documents more easily.
His name was Tim Berners-Lee, a quiet, methodical British scientist working at CERN, the particle physics laboratory in Geneva. He wasn't trying to change the world. He was trying to solve a much smaller problem. CERN employed thousands of researchers from dozens of countries. They constantly produced documents, reports, data, findings, and constantly lost track of them. Someone would leave the organization, taking their knowledge with them. A report written in one department was invisible to another. Information existed. It was just impossible to navigate. In 1989, Berners-Lee wrote a proposal for a system that would link documents together through clickable connections. You're reading one page, you see a reference to another. You click, and you're there instantly. He called these connections hyperlinks, the system of linked pages, the World Wide Web. He submitted the proposal to his boss, Mike Sendall. Sendall read it, picked up a pen, and wrote 4 words on the cover page. Vague, but exciting. He didn't fund it officially, but he told Berners-Lee he could work on it in his spare time. The World Wide Web was built in someone's spare time. By 1991, the first website was live. It was, appropriately, a page explaining what the World Wide Web was. Simple, text only. No images, no color, no design. But it was there, publicly accessible to anyone with an internet connection. And here's the detail that still surprises people. Berners-Lee never patented it, never tried to monetize it. He gave it to the world for free because he believed, and still believes, that it only works if everyone can use it equally. One decision by one person shaped the entire digital world we live in today. But the web existed before most people could actually use it. Browsers were primitive, connections were slow. The internet was still a place for scientists and engineers. That was about to change fast, very fast. In 1993, a small team at the University of Illinois released a piece of software called Mosaic. It was the first browser that could display images alongside text on the same page. Simple by today's standards, revolutionary at the time. Suddenly, the web had a face. You could see it, not just read it. Mosaic spread like wildfire through universities and research labs. One of the people who noticed was a young programmer named Mark Andreessen, one of Mosaic's own creators. He moved to Silicon Valley, raised money, and built a commercial version. They called it Netscape. By 1994, ordinary people were downloading it, installing it, and seeing the internet for the first time. What they found was chaos, and they loved it. Websites were hideous. Blinking text, clashing colors, background music that started playing without warning. No design rules, no standards, no taste. Just thousands of people shouting into the digital void, figuring it out as they went. It was the Internet's awkward teenage years, and it was magnificent. Then came the money. Investors looked at this exploding new world and saw infinite possibility. Companies with no revenue, no product, sometimes no clear idea, raised millions of dollars simply by adding .com to their name. Everyone was going to get rich. The .com boom was irrational, loud, and intoxicating. Then, in 2000, it collapsed. Hundreds of companies evaporated overnight. Billions of dollars disappeared. The party ended as suddenly as it began. But here is what the crash didn't destroy: Amazon, Google, the infrastructure, the habits. Millions of people had gotten used to the Internet, and they weren't going back. The .com bust didn't kill the Internet. It just cleared the room of everyone who wasn't serious. What came next wasn't a boom. It was something quieter and far more permanent. The survivors of the .com crash had learned something valuable. The Internet wasn't a get-rich-quick scheme. It was infrastructure, like electricity, like roads. You don't get rich by owning a road. You get rich by building something useful on top of it. And in the early 2000s, people started building. Broadband internet arrived in homes. For the first time, the connection was fast enough to actually do things: stream music, watch video, download files in minutes instead of hours. The dial-up screech that had defined the 90s internet experience quietly disappeared. The web stopped being a destination you visited and became a place you lived. Then, in 2004, a 19-year-old Harvard student launched a social network from his dorm room. You know this story. Within a few years, Facebook had hundreds of millions of users, then billions. For the first time in history, ordinary people weren't just consuming the Internet, they were filling it. Every photo, every status update, every argument in the comments section, all of it was content created by users for users. In 2007, Apple released the iPhone. Another door opened. The Internet, which had lived on desktops and laptops, suddenly fit in your pocket. It went everywhere you went. It was there when you woke up and there when you fell asleep. YouTube, Twitter, Wikipedia, Spotify, Netflix. Each one arriving within a few years of each other. Each one quietly restructuring how humans spend their time and attention. And somewhere in the middle of all this, people stopped saying, "I'm going on the Internet," the same way they stopped saying, "I'm going to turn on the electricity." It just became the background of everything. Invisible, essential, assumed. The military survival network had become the nervous system of modern civilization. But the story isn't over. Not even close. Let's take a step back. A group of sleep-deprived students in a basement sent 2 accidental letters, L.O., and crashed a system. A quiet scientist in Geneva built something in his spare time and gave it away for free. A programmer picked at because nothing else was using it. A 19-year-old launched a website from a dorm room. No single person built the Internet. No single government planned it. No single company owns it. It grew the way living things grow, through small decisions, happy accidents, and the stubbornness of people who believed something was possible before anyone else did. And here's what still strikes me about this story. The internet was born from fear. Fear of nuclear war. Fear of silence. Fear of a world where communication could be cut off in an instant. The entire architecture, the packet switching, the redundant routes, the decentralized design, all of it was built around one core idea. The message must get through, no matter what. And it did, just not the message anyone expected. Instead of military commands surviving a nuclear strike, love letters survived. Protests survived. Science survived. Art survived. Languages that were disappearing found new homes online. People who had never left their hometown connected with minds on the other side of the planet. The engineers built a system to survive destruction. And what survived, mostly, was human connection. That's the actual history of the internet. Not just wires and protocols and acronyms, but the story of what happens when you give people a way to reach each other and then get out of the way. The internet is still evolving. Artificial intelligence is reshaping how we search, create, and communicate. Decentralized networks are challenging who controls the infrastructure. Quantum computing may one day change encryption and data transfer entirely. The next chapter is already being written, and somewhere right now, in a dorm room, in a basement, in a government lab, someone is working on something that sounds like science fiction, something their colleagues think is vague, but exciting. Thanks for watching Custom Stories in English. I'll see you in the next one.